Welcome to the first meeting of the SBOM study group. This is one of our kickoff meetings, which means it's designed to help set the structure for the future. Now, this particular meeting will, of course, follow an agenda, and I will show you that in just a minute. However, first, I want to display the antitrust policy notice. We show this at the beginning of every meeting hosted by the OpenChain project. The full antitrust policy can be found on the Linux Foundation website. It's designed to make sure that everyone knows how to comfortably interact in this public community space. If you're from a Linux Foundation member company, you can ask any questions of our counsel, Andy Updegrove. If you're from a company outside of the Linux Foundation and you have any questions, please do ask them of your own legal counsel. Now, just before I dive into the agenda, I'll make a note that there's some new faces on this call, and therefore I'll introduce myself. I'm Shane Coughlin. I'm the General Manager of the OpenChain project. I try to facilitate our various work groups and study groups around the world and to help ensure that our community can communicate effectively. Today's meeting of the new SBOM study group is designed to bring together various conversations, ideas, and thoughts from the OpenChain community and beyond. The agenda covers 4 items. We will introduce the practical considerations of using SBOMs in supply chains. We will discuss who these considerations apply to. We will talk about existing market solutions by having a case study on something called SPDX Lite. That's an SBOM format. And then we'll have an open discussion on next steps. We'll talk about where we might want to go as a study group and how we ensure that the timing and content is always valuable for you. Now, OpenChain likes to make sure that everything is kept relatively informal, and therefore, you are most welcome to jump in and ask questions or similar at any time. I'm also giving permission, it's been granted now, for anyone to unmute themselves and raise a question if they have one. Proceeding, I'd like to welcome our chair for this year. It's Kubota-san, Senior Open Source Strategist in the Open Source Program Office of Sony, a contributor to the OpenChain project, SPDX project, and beyond. Kubota-san has many years' experience in this field and is also one of the board members of the OpenChain project. Kubota-san, thank you very much for being one of the people behind forming this study group, and also for volunteering to be the chair taking us through this year as we get started. Kubota-san will be the person presenting the case study on SPDX Lite in a few minutes. Kubota-san, would you like to say a word or two?
No, I don't have a specific word, but thank you very much, Shane, and all attendees. I'm very excited to discuss about how to use the SBOM, not only SPDX, but also CycloneDX and so on. So, I hope we can have a good discussion in this study group. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. And I would just note that on this call, we have a great collection of people from all around the world. Just some examples. A good friend of mine from China Mobile has dialed in from China, obviously. We have attendees dialing in from Germany, from India, from Japan, and elsewhere. This is great, as it indicates a lot of interest in the topic, and it indicates to us that whether people are based in the UK or Sweden, whether people are based in the United States or in Korea, everyone is interested in how do we use SBOMs in the supply chain. And that's what takes us to setting context. Why are we interested in talking about this topic? And there are a few notes about the practical considerations for software bill of materials in the supply chain. One is what is necessary for compliance matters. For example, corporate license compliance, corporate security assurance, and other compliance-related topics. The second is what regulations exist. For instance, the United States Executive Order, the NTIA minimum requirements, and the Cyber Resilience Act in the European Union. And then finally, and very importantly, what's necessary for efficiency? Addressing compliance and regulations is one thing, but businesses have to make sure that they keep their overheads low and they ensure that suppliers can realistically meet SBOM requirements. Our topic, therefore, is very much focused on how do we get this done? How do we get the compliance stuff and the regulatory stuff done in the context of the real, practical, and occasionally messy market? The second point, who these considerations apply to, is one of the most simple. From the perspective of the parties behind this study group, the question of how is everyone using the open source supply chain? Whether people are using a format like SPDX or an in-house format for SBOM or an alternative industry or international standard like Cyclone. Whether people are a supplier or a customer, whether people are from a big company or a small company. These considerations of compliance, regulation, and efficiency apply to everyone. Now, we're going to jump into the case study that Koboto-san has kindly prepared, but I did notice that we have one question from Sandra. Have we decided on a schedule for this meeting? When do we meet from now onwards? It's a great question, Sandra. We will address that during the open discussion on next steps, which will happen after Koboto-san's presentation. But the short version is, we basically expect to set a regular meeting schedule from September onwards. We're starting this study group at the end of July, just before the big August break, to help get the feedback we need to set a regular meeting for the September onward period. Right. Existing market solutions. How is not an empty question or a speculation. We are doing things in the open source supply chain with software bill of materials, both for license compliance and for regulatory compliance matters. There are very practical solutions out there that are helping to address the challenges of real companies today. We're going to have a case study on SPDX Lite as an example of a practical solution that addresses the question of what type of approach can empower suppliers to get started with SBOM. The context being that suppliers have limited resources. Both suppliers and customers need minimal, oops, and I see a typo there, need minimal adjustment to deployment processes, and time is extremely limited for everyone. So Koboto-san, I'm going to hand over to you for the case study on how SPDX addresses the limited resources, minimal adjustment, and limited time questions in the real world as our first case study in the SBOM study group.
Okay. Thank you, Shane. I'd like to share my screen. And could you see my video for wait a moment? Can you see my screen?
Currently, we cannot see your screen. I can see your video, but your screen sharing does not seem to be active at the moment.
It works for me.
Okay. In that case, it might just be my end.
Okay.
Everyone else, can you see the slides?
Yes, I can see that.
Great.
Okay.
Wonderful.
If you have any trouble, please let me know in the chat box. I'll check it. Okay. Hello, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present today. And I'm Norio Kota from Sony Group Corporation. But today, I present as a member of OpenChain Project Japan Working Group. And to kick off this SBOM study group, and today I'd like to introduce our efforts and objectives regarding SBOM, especially SPDX. And in the near future, after the September, and I'd like to discuss issues to effectively utilize SBOM in the actual software supply chain. For that purpose, I would be happy if many of you could introduce your issues and actual activities in this study group. Thank you. And I'll start my presentation. From version SPDX 2.2, I remember, the SPDX specification has an annex for SPDX Lite. It is a cooperation from the SPDX project member, like Alexio. Thank you very much. And SPDX Lite is the result of the discussions within the OpenChain Japan community on how to effectively deliver software information across complex software supply chains, and the result of the contribution to the SPDX project. And in our use case, the key to the SBOM is the timing of receipt and distribution. And let's think about the intake timing here. And upstream companies in the software supply chain, there are still quite a few companies that are not used to working with open source software and more SBOM. And what happens in this case? As you can imagine, they simply download the original source code from GitHub and generate an SBOM with some SEA tools. This is Authority. But in this case, the package name is the file name, and the license information is generated with a completely meaningless value, no assertion. Of course, this is an extreme example, but the information output by these tools varies. And it often happens that the information we want is not provided in many cases. The idea is for upstream companies to generate and provide a complete SBOM. It's true, and we are working to achieve that. But it will take a little while for every company in the world to do that, I think. So therefore, in reality, when an SBOM we received, knowledgeable engineers or teams analyze the details with source code or metadata and so on. I think it is a current reality. And then let's think about the distribution timing. Okay. And in many cases, the software we distribute is a part of a commercial product or services. And our company is responsible for that product and services. And when something goes wrong, our customers rarely look into the details of the software and fix it. The information they need is what the problem is and how it is affected and when it will be fixed, I think, isn't it? So with communities and companies at various SBOM levels or open software maturity levels, composing complex software supply chain. So we believe that SBOM is a common language for passing necessary information. So specifications such as which properties should be written in which format and what values should be written in the SBOM should improve tool interoperability and facilitate information distribution. In this regard, we believe, OpenChain Japan community believe that standardizing SPDX and CycloneDX is very meaningful. And SPDX Lite has always been designed from the point of the view of what kind of minimum information we need to be able to do detailed analysis and fulfill our responsibilities as a commercial company. So let me introduce the SPDX Lite in SPDX 3.0. SPDX Lite is essentially designed for license compliance while adhering to the full SPDX spec. So first point, there is no difference in mandatory properties. However, some items are specified what to write. And secondly, providing license information is not mandatory in 3.0 spec, but the right profile requires them. A third point is there are some properties that should be filled in as much as possible. Recommendation. As many of you know, license compliance task is very hard and time-consuming task. So they are not mandatory, but it would be better to write for reducing these efforts. And everything else is optional. These are the SPDX Lite design principles. So here's the overview data structure for Lite profile. Very simplified. And we basically think that passing package level information correctly is the most important thing and the first step for the detailed analysis. And let's look into at each of the specifications for Lite profile. The information for the SPDX document class we want to know is who created the document and what it contains. Other properties are recommendation or required by original spec. And SBOM class is the same as the SPDX document class. And for the creation information class, it should include who created and when it was created. And this is a recommendation. Also, we also recommend to include creator's email address. We think it is somewhat useful to provide the email information when we met some trouble. We can contact easily by using this email address. And this is package information. We think it is important to include package name and package version and who created the package and who provided this package and where it originated are the mandatory properties. So sometimes the package doesn't have package URL. So download location for package URL should be described. And for license compliance, it's mandatory to write copyright notice, copyright text, and to associate with license information by using relationship object. And I've explained the light profile specification so far, but I think it's a little hard to understand just watching the specification. So we created a simple sample to verify that it can be used in our use case and ask SPDX people, is it correct or not? So you can refer these samples from this URL. And of course, recent SBOM require discussions on security. So we have created samples and discussed if there are any issues or challenges when using with specs and security profiles. And we send the actual sample as a pull request to the SPDX community and reviewed by the SPDX engineers. As far as I know, very few JSON examples with SPDX 3.0 published. So we hope you will find this somewhat useful. And SPDX Lite have been used by several Japanese companies since version 2.2, and they have demonstrated it with AGL at CES in the past. And I can't paste the photo and so on, but in the recent OpenChain Japan all-member meeting, we got the survey, what type of SBOM do you use in your company? And some of the companies in Japan use the SPDX Lite actually. And the survey result will be released soon in the OpenChain project Japan Working Group GitHub. So if you are interested in, please let me know. I'll share the material later. And I've heard that SPDX Lite was popular among legal and intellectual property people because they can process the SBOM information in a spreadsheet only. But after version 3.0, it is a little difficult because it is difficult to handle in the spreadsheet. But we will continue to discuss among the OpenChain Japan community and consult with SPDX people later, I think. And at last, thank you for SPDX project team, including today's attendees, Alexios. Thank you very much. The SPDX team set up an Asia call once a month because the SPDX tech meeting or some other meeting are held in US and European time. So it is a little difficult for Asian people. Yeah, but thank you very much. And that's all from my presentation. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments?
And of course, a reminder that anyone is welcome to ask a question either by unmuting or by typing it. So Kubota-san, I just have a very brief one, which is related to the length of time it took to develop SPDX Lite. So it seems to have been around now for quite a few years. Did it take a long time to create it?
I remember the discussion occurred in 2018. And discussed about 1 year among the Japan community. And Fukuchi-san from Sony Group reach out the SPDX specification. And this is similar discussion. There are many similar discussions in the world, but we decided it would be better to contribute existing projects other than discussing only us, only Japan community. And we continue to discuss and contribute to other community SPDX projects. So I think it would be better. This time we created a SBOM study group here, but if there are more better place, other place, we will. I'm happy to join other place.
Yeah. Hello,
Sorry.
Arun here. Kubota-san, I have a question to you. So, from the Japanese working group, do you have any experience on the usage of Cyclone DX with any organizations?
Thank you for the question. Some of us, some of the members in Japan communities have the knowledge about the Cyclone DX, but I'm not sure, and we didn't have the discussion about the Cyclone DX so far.
Okay, so an add-on question here to Kubota-san or Shane here. So, in this study working group, are we limiting it to SPDX and SPDX Lite, or are we also exploring other specifications like Cyclone DX and software ID?
I don't know what Shane thinking, but I don't care about the format of the SBOM because my intention is that what is the practical use of the SBOM. So it is not limited to SPDX and Cyclone DX. And of course, CSAR for BEX is also targeted. How to use is the main topic, I think. I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I would also share that thing. I think the more important part is on understanding the elements which are directly responsible for security and compliance and how we can fit into the life cycle. Yeah, but since we are kicking off a new study group, I just wanted to clarify the direction that we are heading so that we can set the right expectations.
Thank you.
Can I jump in as well? I think I've just said something on the comment which I think supports that. I think we need to be looking at content and the use cases of an SBOM and then think about formats. SPDX, Cyclone DX, SWID. Yes, it's disappointing we have two major standards, but let's focus on the content because that ultimately is what we want the end users to be looking at. And ultimately, that's what the SBOM, we need to be focusing on how an end user will use an SBOM. Internally, I think we all understand how an SBOM will benefit our dev teams. But ultimately, I think we need to look at what the use cases for an end user are, what they value in terms of information that's valuable for them, and then define what the format should be. So is that the direct direction of travel that you'd want the study group to go to?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I agree. And Alex, just please speak up.
Thank you, Kabira-san. Yeah, I also want to say the same things, that, yeah, we shouldn't be focusing on the format, but we should be focusing, and not actually, as Anthony said, not only on the content, but also on the processes, right? How do we use it, and how, how these things are moved around, and who looks at them, and how should they be produced and transferred and stuff like that. So yeah, the format, we can just ignore it for now and talk about SBOMs in general. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, completely agree. And every time we asked from my colleagues in my company, what content should be filled in the SBOM? And there are many topics described in the format, but what should be included in the SBOM is rarely found. So I'd like to discuss about that in this study group.
David had some great notes as well. David, would you like to talk to them or just want to leave it written?
No, I'm happy to talk to them. I'm also happy to open my video if you want. So we've come across multiple customers who have various different scanning tools for SBOMs, and they're using also a combination of SPDX and CycloneDX, and they have open source, they have custom packaged products, or I should say components. They're getting components from their supply chain, and all of those have to be integrated together. But we really can't forget the quality of the SBOMs, and this is something that's really important, because when in fact, I had a conversation with Alan Friedman last week from CISA, the Cybersecurity Critical Infrastructure Agency in the US, and he said one of the biggest problems is not only interoperability, but the fact that you have all of these different tools. You need to make sure that they're all producing similar quality SBOMs, which they aren't today, and that we know for a fact. So even when you talk about the distribution of these SBOMs, you have to first of all worry about the quality. We have to worry about how they interoperate together, within one environment, especially when you're talking about compliance. And if you're talking about supply chain, well, then it's a whole nother game, because you're getting components. If you're familiar with Embedded World in Nuremberg, there are 5 halls of small and medium-sized and large component providers who provide manufacturers with millions of different types of components, and each one of those now, according to CRA and according to WP29 R155, and if it's medical devices, the FDA's pre-market in the US, they require SBOMs. And these people are cyber poor. They don't know the first thing about SBOMs, and it's a big issue. So I think we need to look at, even just getting back to basics, quality, interoperability, and then, how you take it from there and managing all of the different SBOMs. Just I'll leave you with one last thing, which is I spoke to an automotive OEM manufacturer, and now that cars are being updated, the software is being updated OTA, so over the air, each one of those updates is a new SBOM. So it's not just that you have a vehicle identification number that is an SBOM, but every time there's an update, that also is an SBOM. So you're talking about so many different variations. Just, if we think about one vehicle, over the course of 5 years, that vehicle could have 50 SBOMs, depending on how often, the updates are made. So we're talking about, it's not just like, thinking about the distribution. It's thinking about how we're going to manage this as especially the big manufacturers on the call here. How are we going to manage all of that?
Thank you, David. Great input there. And I noticed this touches on something that Anthony just brought up, and a couple of minutes ago, we also had a Lynn touch. I think it was a Lynn. Let me just Leo touched this topic. Leo was talking about how to manage unmatched components from upstream. And Anthony was talking about quality of SBOM, pointing out that the way we use SBOMs to try to improve the software ecosystem is important to try to ensure that metadata is correct. And again, we're looking at missing or incorrect metadata. So the very practical situation is upstream, current stream, and downstream. How do we get accurate SBOMs, regardless of what the SBOM is, regardless of what our purpose is? If it's a supply chain, how do we get accurate? Now, Yan made a note in the chat as well, saying that quality will always be an issue. And, perhaps focusing on interoperability might help. Quality criteria, interoperability, and then verification could allow us to make sure, or at least to address some of the question of how does information move through the supply chain. These are just comments from the chat that came up and I thought were interesting. There was another comment that I thought was interesting. It's from Alin, and it's a question, and this is something maybe Kubota-san can speak to. The question is there any plan to support SPDX Lite for future SPDX versions? Now, Kubota-san, if I recall correctly, SPDX Lite has been included in SPDX since version 2.2.1 that became ISO 5962. So it's in the current ISO standard, but the question is there a plan to support SPDX Lite in future SPDX versions?
Yes, as I communicated with SPDX communities and project communities and talk with some specific persons, and they supported us to include that ISO specification. It's my understanding. Is it correct? I'd like to confirm with Alexios.
Of course, it's correct, Kubota-san.
Thank you very much.
So the SPDX3 that is currently, we have published 3.00 and we're now finalizing 3.01, which will be sent to ISO to become a standard. And this includes SPDX Lite specification, definitely.
Well, that's great news for continuity. So, Alin, the answer is yes. So if you're using SPDX Lite with ISO 5962:2021, you can expect to use it in the next update of the ISO standard as well. A comment from Ninjoji-san, one of our big community contributors and another OpenChain board member, that he likes the idea of having this study group as a place to discuss practices in companies and to build certain consensus around SBOM management, which seems to be the most common topic we've had here today. With that, it sounds like we're perfectly positioned for the next part of this call, which is to discuss next steps. And we really have three questions. How often should we meet? How should we address topics? And how long should the meetings be? So I've got three initial suggestions, and they're just designed to provoke conversation. You might agree, you might not. You might have another idea. All of that is valid. This kickoff call is designed for that. The initial suggestion to get the conversation started is that we meet once a month and we have one case study per meeting. Like today, we had this overview of SPDX Lite, and the meeting could be 1 or 2 hours long. Do you think that would be interesting for you? would it be useful for you? Would it help reach the goal of making sure practical how-to information is available? David, I noticed you unmuted yourself. If you want to jump in, you are most welcome.
I was just going to say that there are groups that meet on a weekly basis, and their goal is different work groups have different goals, and some of them are more policy oriented, some of them are more information oriented, and I think that once a month is actually quite good for sharing information. And maybe there should be a way of during that month having a mechanism. Maybe it's a Slack channel, maybe it's something else where people can share information also during the month, and not just not just wait for the month's meeting to come, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And the good news is that we have already set up a mailing list and a Slack channel for this group. So I'll put that into the chat. I'll put the link to that into the chat so that people can access that information. Alexios, I noticed your hand is up.
It's down now. My question was also, besides the meetings, will we also have a way to communicate asynchronously, outside the meetings? But it's already covered. Thank you.
You're super welcome. We have a dedicated mailing list, which is probably the most common way for us to facilitate discussion. We have a Slack channel, and we've got a dedicated GitHub repo, so we can store the case studies and so on and so forth. Great question came in from Anthony. How different is this to other SBOM meetings going on around the world, like OpenSSF, CISA, and so on? So Anthony, I'd say the primary difference with us is that the OpenChain project is very much a global, cross-industry process management project. We're not focused on one geography, like, for example, a bias towards United States infrastructure management. We're not biased towards one topic, like, for example, security. What we're instead focused on is the very large question of what are the commonalities in industrial software process management. So our goal would not be to replicate or repeat what others are doing, but to address the big picture of what are the common challenges and common solutions in essentially the industrial global open source supply chain. Some of those solutions will be very much about learning what has OpenSSF done in this domain. What is CISA up to? I mean, Alan is obviously epically good on this topic. But we also want to ask questions like, what's happening over in European telco as they determine SBOM quality for their industrial sector? OpenChain actually just released a guide on that, built by our telco workgroup. Or what type of regulation around software bill of materials is emerging in China, in what domains and why? In very practical terms, in Europe, how is the Cyber Resilience Act adding or not adding to the industrial supply chain requirements? So our optic is very high, Anthony, and what we'd hope to do is to bring together bits of information from around the world, find those commonalities, and try to make sure that companies engaging with us in our space will be getting the type of useful, practical information that they need for all the different aspects of how to manage their SBOMs in supply chain. That doesn't mean that we're going to be more useful than anyone else, and it doesn't mean that we're trying to dilute audiences. Essentially, where this came from was that we had a lot of SBOM stuff happening in OpenChain with this wide optic, and we wanted to bring it together in one space. So the telco SBOM quality work, the Japanese work on things like SPDX Lite, and we wanted to bring it together in the context of OpenChain. But as this audience shows, where we had around 40 people on this call, the interest goes far beyond just the OpenChain community itself. That's great. And I do hope to be doing things like asking Alan to dial in and tell us what's up at CISA and let us know what should be on our radar. We do expect to have people who are experts in things like the Emerging Cyber Resilience Act talk to that in more detail. That being said, we already have dug into some of these topics, and you can find, for example, a great series of webinars covering the CRA and other European topics like the Product Liability Directive and the AI Act. I put a link into our webinar series as a whole. There's 90 webinars there in total, and I just put a direct link into the CRA. Right. Any further questions at this juncture? If not, then my next question is, what do you think? Monthly, one case study per workshop, about 1 hour long, and the next one is in September. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think monthly one would be better.
All right. Now the audience seems to be remarkably good. Should we stick at this time for now? So, Europe morning, Asia afternoon. What do you think?
I think this time is fine. I would say let's stick to this.
The time is great. If we can find any other day but Tuesday, it will be even better for me because I cannot attend Tuesdays.
Okay, no, that's really good feedback. So not Tuesdays, around this time, starting September. How about Wednesdays? This is just a vague question to see if anyone has a regular block on Wednesdays. And I'm asking it because OpenChain tends to have meetings on Tuesdays or Thursdays. So Wednesdays tend to be a little bit open.
I think Wednesdays we do have the OpenChain, the automation tooling group. I mean, I'm not sure about the latest calendar because my calendar doesn't reflect that, but I'm sure that Wednesday morning there is something because at Software 360 community we had adjusted our time according to that. So maybe it would be wise to check that once and then take the next step.
Yeah, even I remember seeing a tooling group meeting on some Wednesdays.
The tooling group is happening every 2 weeks, and we're talking about doing it monthly. So, and the tooling group alternates between mornings and afternoons. So probably we will be okay, but we definitely have to check it. Yeah.
Okay. Marcel's hand is up. I'm guessing this is about the tooling group as well. All right. I don't hear any audio on your end, Marcel, just so you know.
Oh, but Koboto-san wrote on the chat that it doesn't work for him, so we can forget Wednesdays. That's the easy.
I'm sorry. Wednesday doesn't work for me.
Oh, goodness, our chair is the only one causing trouble.
But I tried to arrange my schedule once a month.
Yeah. No. I mean, the fact is Wednesday was just an example. Well, let's put it on the mailing list. Let's do a sample test. And I mean, we have plenty of days to choose from. So not Tuesday, we know, and Wednesday, preferably not as well. Got it.
I think from today's participant, the quantity, I think today is the best time, at least for me as well.
Yes, but we can't get Alexius on Tuesdays. but it's a very good point, Mary. Let's say
Because
the
today
time
we
is
have
great.
40 people, right? We have 40 people join
Yes,
today at
amazing.
this time. If we can keep this number, it would be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, you know, the timing, 9 a.m. in Europe and then 4 p.m. here in Japan. It's 3 p.m. in China. I'm not sure what time it is in India. I think it's 12:30.
12:30.
All right. Okay. Regardless of the day, this is the time. All right, everyone. We'll continue on the mailing list to set the actual final start date for September and monthly onwards. And I'll work with Kubota-san and everyone else, mailing list and Slack, to begin to arrange our case studies as we go. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your contribution.
May I also suggest that we avoid the first week of the month, because lots of things are on monthly cadence happening on the first week of the month. So yeah, we can choose maybe another week.
I completely agree. I'm looking at the first week on my month and it's a nightmare in September. So somewhere around the middle of September, we'll get it done. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful
Thank you
day.
all.
Have
Bye-bye.
a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.